Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season finale of The Rook. A great season finale. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Obviously, you have Bronwyn setting everything up so that Miffy can leave and kind of start her new life. Obviously for her, it's like, if I leave, the Shikei is never going to stop looking for me. It's like, yes, but that's only going to be for a little while. Because obviously everything that they've done, the resistance has kind of made it so, like, especially where the Shikei currently stands because of the whole Linda scandal, it's actually put them in a very unfavorable position. So it's like they're kind of on their last legs essentially. And when the time comes and this group gets dismantled or whatever, then we won't have to worry about the Shikei anymore. It'll take a little while, but you'll get to live your life. But as she was leaving, she's kind of stressing about it because I think she's thinking about everything related to the Shikei, like all the people, all she's known. Because for her, it's, I mean, even, think about it, like without all her memories, this past week with the Shikei and whatnot, because it had been like 5 days at most she had been with them over the course of the series, like a couple episodes back. So it's probably been like a week or more or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, it's all she's known. It's all she knows. At least as Miffy, before she lost all her memories, it would have been a little bit more split, but it still would have been like a good chunk of her life would be with the Shikei. But the fact of the matter is, it's all she knows. So it's kind of hard to kind of leave that all behind. Plus knowing your connection to them in the past and regardless. But she ends up getting taken. It's actually interesting. We end up breaking down some stuff. It turns out the Shikei had lied to her. She doesn't actually have a bee allergy, but there's like a neurotoxin in bee venom that neutralizes her powers. I was like, that's so interesting. I guess it's like, I wonder does this kind of work in a similar regard as kind of like a X-Men or Heroes type of thing, where it's like there's something in your genetic makeup, like it is a like mutation. Like I wonder is that how EVAs work. They never really dive too much into like the whole aspect of how EVAs work. At least I don't think they really did. It's just kind of like you have powers or you don't. And so maybe it's like something like it mixes with like her genetic code in a weird way, creating that anomaly where it's like her powers disappear. I'm curious, or maybe it's like it's all in your head. Maybe it's like something in your brain chemistry creates your power, and then the venom kind of, at least in her case, it kind of nullifies that. Regardless, it turns out the Legat did capture her. I was wondering what was up because it almost seemed like every time you see Peter, that dick, he's locked up and he's still like, oh, happy and because he knew what was going down. He knew that eventually everyone would catch her anyway. But what's really interesting is, it was actually Lorik was behind the entire thing. Because my understanding, because the way the conversation went down, especially between Peter and Marcus, it seemed like Lorik had no idea. Marcus was being like, not Marcus, but Peter was kind of like, I'll do it because that's kind of what Lorik would want. So I'm kind of acting on my own, but I know that's kind of what he would want in general. I thought that was kind of a BS excuse he was giving, but it turns out, no, it might not even been an excuse. Maybe they had some idea that Marcus was on. Maybe, Peter was just kind of like, I know what Lorik wants, even though he won't say it. So it's interesting, like, things kind of ended up playing out like this, because that was always a plan, like, when Miffy came to him for like, get me out of the country, basically get me out safely. It was like, that whole thing from that moment on, it's like, the moment we get you, we were going to sell you anyway. So it's like, damn, so I guess, and once again, it kind of makes, but it seemed like it was almost like two different groups. Like Lorik had his deal, but at the same time, it almost seemed like Peter was kind of doing his own thing, but it's like, it was all one and the same, which is also interesting considering the fact that Conrad went to Lorik because Conrad's going through some issues. It's like, he literally just got the job from Linda and he has Jennifer being like, yeah, the Shikei is about to get dismantled and EVAs are about to be scattered to all the different security groups within the government and stuff like that. And it's like, for Conrad, he's like, it's not fair. Like, Linda's issues are her issues. Let it kind of be known that I'm taking over things. But Jennifer's like, it doesn't work like that. You're finally in the spotlight now. You're under the microscope, and that's what it's like. Basically, going forward, any mistakes that happen is going to be your fault. You kind of have to deal with it. And so he went to Lorik for help because he had the whole conversation with Linda. It's like, hey, I'm going to get you to sign this paper. Like, we have enough to kind of, take, sentence you for, basically go through the court system with what we got for you because it's treason and all that, but you sign this, we'll kind of give you the package deal, security and all this stuff. You'll kind of be able to go free. And she thinks it's a game, but for him it's like, no, basically he inherited quite the shitstorm because Miffy's gone, she's in the wind, they have no idea how to track her. Now there's this whole situation, with Linda, and now, the Shikei is up for review. It's just one thing after another. But basically, Linda gives him the best advice of being like, now that you're kind of in the hot seat, you need to stop playing the game so safe. The fact of the matter is, you need to get down in the mud when it comes down to it, so... That was kind of, because I was wondering about that, because they made a point to introduce that last episode, but even Linda kind of brushed it off like, the fact of the matter is, because obviously it was a prologue, but it was kind of like, they bring that up like every other year, it's fine. And it turns out to be a big issue, because it turns out Linda's whole situation pushed him to be like, we don't know about this whole chicane. They were already on the fence about it, but this was enough to kind of shift it, which I guess that's kind of the whole point. That's kind of interesting, because she was the one being like, oh, they're never really going to do anything about it. She doesn't take it seriously, and it ends up being her that ends up pushing them into being serious about this whole thing. So that's a complicated thing, but that's what pushed him to go to Lorik and asking for help. And Lorik wanted Peter released as kind of a bit of a bargaining chip of just being like, kind of giving him his favor of like, yeah, with my help, I'll make sure that like the review kind of disappears and the chicane will be kept safe. But now, like I said, it turns out the bastard's behind all of this, and that Sophia, I kind of wanted her to kind of get hers as well, just because the way she's just so like Miffy's kind of teared up and it looks like a little bit of her makeup's running, and then she's kind of like, kind of wiping her face like, wipe your tears, and she got a smile on her face. Like, I want to punch you in your face. I wish Miffy had like knocked her out or something like that. It's also sad too, because along with all these circumstances, there's the whole Gestalt situation. Well, for one, I got Teddy waking up with Monica. It's being a little awkward, but he's like, let's just forget this ever happened. And she's like, yeah, sure, whatever. And he's like, yeah, glad we could kind of agree. It's kind of a... both of them weren't necessarily in the best mindset at the time. They were both kind of dealing with their respective love life situation, the complicated love life situation on both their cases. But Miffy had wrote a letter. I thought it was kind of sweet, where it's like, I actually remember this particular memory of us, and that spark, I want you to know that it was real. And the fact of the matter is, there's nothing that you could have done to kind of stop me from, leaving like this. I like the line of like, I got to figure out who I am outside of everyone who has this notion of who I was before. And I thought that was such a neat thing, because it's the whole thing of like, everyone expects me to be the Miffy that I was before. Even they expect her to kind of be the Miffy that she was before. But it's like, that's not who I am anymore. I can never be her, because we don't have the same experiences, because I literally don't remember everything that made that Miffy. Those experiences are what make us us, and without them, we're kind of a different person. And it seems like, and it kind of plays into the story that Miffy is a different person now. So there's all that. Linda herself also gets kidnapped by the Lugat. They're taking advantage of all of the, making big moves. It's so interesting. I guess they figured that they'd be able to do this without anyone knowing what was up, because Linda's kind of separated from the organization now. Miffy was on the run. So it's like, they both are in the wind, so us kidnapping them, kind of, it's okay, while also making sure that their relationship with the chicane is still in place. So like, that's double dickish. It's like you're kidnapping their people while also smiling and shaking their hand at the same time. It's a real dick move. Obviously, the moment everyone finds out, because I love that twist where it's like Miffy's getting shipped away, she's trying to help that little girl Gemma, and the driver stopped, and the guy couldn't get it fixed. I was like, is Miffy about to make a move or something? But the dude stabs the guy. I was like, what? And it's like, I was like, didn't Bronwyn send you? But technically not necessarily. It was, he's part of the resistance, and it's just like, get this little girl Gemma out of there, because we saw a lot of the people that were selling, like, either, because it turned out Gemma was like, 10 years old, and they were willing to sell her. That's some like messed up crap, dude. I mean, to be fair, it's, it's almost like it's human trafficking meeting X-Men, which makes me wonder, has that ever happened in the comic books? Like, because obviously, like, there's a whole conversation about how X-Men, obviously has always been an allegory for racism. So I'm wondering, has that ever happened in the comic books, where it's like mutants getting trafficked? I'm sure it has. I just thought that was kind of interesting. Like, that's what it just immediately kind of got me thinking about to a certain extent. But it was like, that's just super messed up to do that. Like, treating people more like things rather than people, because they have an ability and stuff like that. So Miffy goes in, she's not leaving without Linda. And obviously Conrad's trying to get, help from Jennifer, but Jennifer's like, there's not much I can do, can't give you. But Conrad's like, nah, bump that. Like, no matter what the situation is, we're going to get our people out of there. So sends in a Gestalt. Once again, this is our first time fully seeing what the Gestalt is all about, seeing them operate, kind of divide to a certain extent, obviously with the way they work, and conquer, and they're slowly just like it. They are a well-oiled machine. I mean, to be fair, they've been working on this since they were kids, so that's why they've kind of been fully tested to be the unified unit that they are. And so seeing them kind of kick ass like that, because the reason was because Victor, the guy who owns the place, is he has full immunity. So basically stepping on it is properly attacking it would be like attacking Russia itself. So that turns into a whole complicated thing. Obviously they find Miffany, but it's like, no, worry about Linda. I'm not going to leave here until I take care of Lorik, because Lorik is the one that sets up all the dealings and stuff. We stop him. We stop all these EVAs being sold. Not because it's not just about saving me and Linda. We can save so many people. And when the time comes, Lorik makes the whole wisecrack about like, oh, you wish things didn't go down the way they did on the bridge, or you be with your sister right now. It's like, well, hard to regret something I don't remember. And Miffany uses her powers. And what makes this scene so powerful is because not only this is the first time Miffany you would probably almost say her entire life, definitely over the course of the series, but her entire life, that she's ever intentionally used her powers. Every other situation, even the ones we've heard of outside of the show, have been instances of her losing control because of her heightened emotions and stuff like that. But this time she purposely used her powers to kill Lorik. And that kind of plays into the storyline because, there's so many different things to kind of discuss. One, there's the whole situation with Conrad, because obviously it's on the news, like word got out, and it's like, it's like the Chikay is done because now Russia's pissed because Russia and UK apparently already have like very strenuous relationship. This just kind of pushed it over the edge to be like, oh, this is bad because this looks like this attack on Victor's place is like a straight up assault on Russia. So it's causing problems, which now they're going to like distance themselves. It's like, oh yeah, the Chikay is definitely done. But Conrad's like, not for me, it's not. Like, even with these circumstances, he's still going to keep fighting. Because Linda had told him something I thought was kind of neat, where Linda was like, the Chikay isn't just an organization, it's a home for a lot of your agents. Like the Gestalt, for example, they have nothing outside of it. This is all they have. This is what they were trained for, put through so much as kids, so this is kind of all they have. This is their home, this is their foundation. You take this away, you kind of leave them with nothing. So for a lot of people, this is their home, so it's up to Conrad to protect it, and I think that was him saying that he's going to find a way to kind of handle the situation. But we see that in the end, Linda kind of handles it because she's like, blame it on me. Because as someone who's already in the situation of like, all right, I got a whole bunch of issues already, like she was already in plenty enough trouble, plus they distanced themselves from her from the Chikay anyway, so it's just kind of like, oh, she was a rogue operative who's no longer associated with us doing her own thing. That's what I think that comes down to. So Linda's sacrificing herself, being wanted for this, but it's like, keep me in it so that Chikay doesn't kind of suffer from it. So I think that was kind of a nice play on her part to kind of how they handle that whole situation. At the same time, there's a whole situation with Monica trying to figure herself out because she plans on going back home after all of this, but she stops by Nazim. I thought it was kind of sweet. Like, Nazim is like, oh, you're like, my role model. The fact that you came after me like that when no one else would have, that's means a lot. But for Monica, it's like, don't give me too much credit. I didn't do it because it was the right thing or I'm some hero or something. I did it for selfish reasons. I wanted to know what happened to Marcus. That's the end of it all. And the fact of the matter is, now I'm wishing I never found out. I wish all I had was those questions, And so she's asking Nazim to get rid of her memories of Marcus. I thought it was kind of interesting that Nazim never told her that conversation like he had with Marcus, where Marcus wanted to apologize, but I guess like his apology wouldn't have been enough because it brought into question everything. It's not just about herself, but even him. It's like, part of her probably thinks like, well, am I even like, she thought she was in love, and then part of her is like, well, do I even know? It probably makes her question like, well, do I even know what love is? The fact of the matter is, I let someone who I thought loved me fool me, and it's like, I think it's, she's sad, she's angry, she's humiliated. Like, there's so many emotions probably flooding her at once, and she just wants it all to kind of go away. So her memories of Marcus start fading away, which it makes you wonder how that whole connective tissue necessarily works. I'd assume like, because obviously all your other memories are intact, but like, how does like when you kind of like precisely cut these memories, like how does her memory form? Does it create like just a blank spot in that regard, or does that like her memories kind of stitch themselves together in a way? Does it just kind of come like, does her mind create a way to fill in that blank, or is it just kind of like does your brain just kind of block it off where it's like it gets removed, but that part of your brain blocks it, so it's like you don't even try to think about that? I'm wondering how that whole thing works, because they've never really 100% explained like the nuance to it. I mean, they'll be getting into too much detail, but it makes you wonder with that type of situation, because sometimes your brain will try to fill in blanks like that. Like even when you try to remember something, you might not 100% remember it the wrong way, the right way, because memory is weird like that. Over time, your memory gets a little changed because you remember things a little differently more and more time goes by. So I'm curious like how that whole situation would work when it comes to Nazim's powers. But it seemed like something went wrong, because in this case, like, Monica passes out and blood's coming from her nose. We know, like, it seemed like the Miffany thing was completely just because other circumstances were there, but I mean, to be fair, and it seemed like it was also a combination of her power too. So maybe because Monica's memories of Marcus are so rooted in so much of her memories, it's connected to why she came over here to the UK to work with the Chicane in the first place. So much of that, or maybe it's just he's still not. It seems like he's had a lot more success, but I guess because it's not just like one specific memory you're cutting out. I guess that's the same thing with like Miffany. It wasn't just one specific moment or memory that was going. It was a long string of memories. And for him, it's like basically he has to go in and go chop, 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 chop throughout all her memories of all that time she was with Marcus. That's a lot of memory you kind of have to sit through and kind of cut out these little bits here and there. So it's probably hard to kind of really fine tune that without issues. Not unless there was something else there kind of making that an issue. I have no idea. I just thought that was kind of fascinating. But when it's all said and done, I thought it was beautiful how it kind of wraps up with Miffany writing herself a letter to who she was before, saying like, "Dear you, the fact of the matter is you won't get this, but it's so beautiful because like you were able to save me because of these letters that you wrote. The fact of the matter is you helped save a stranger that you knew you were never going to meet. But you still looked after me. You gave me choices. You gave me options. You spent your last days preparing all this for me. And the fact of the matter is, you know, now without all these memories, like I'm without all your pain, all your doubt, the fact of the matter is I'm the version of you that you could have been." Basically being like, I hope you're proud of the person. I like to think that you're proud of the person that I become because of you, I have the strength to do whatever I want to. I have this power and I'm going to do with it things that you wouldn't even imagine. Like I said, this is her using her power fully. And I think she even noticed it too. She was looking at her head like, holy shit, I did that on purpose. It's never like even like Miffany before the memory wipe never did that, never used her powers on purpose. She never got control of them. But this shows you that this is a different Miffany. Her like Miffany's previous experience, her entire life kind of, you know, she was kind of a self-conscious person, but everything and a lot of parts of her life made her not confident enough to use her powers. But now it's like, no, without all that weighing me down, I can use these powers. And the question then becomes, what will she use those powers for, you know? And then we got that nice little tease at the end where we see Linda is kicking it with the Resistance because her and Bronwyn are together. I was like, now that's really interesting. So that brings up the question of where could things go forward from here? At the time of me recording this, it's unclear whether or not the show is getting renewed for a second season. I hope it does. But especially the way this ends off, because obviously, if you're unaware, this is based on a book of the same name. So I don't know how much of this is covering the book. From what I could also tell, I forgot what it was, but I had looked it up. There is a sequel to the book that this is based on. So I don't know whether this is like the entire first book and then like, you know, maybe a second season would be about the second book. I think it's kind of like the best they compare it to is like Altered Carbon. Basically, Altered Carbon is like a trilogy. But basically, it's like the Takeshi Kovacs trilogy is kind of what those books are. But like the other books have different names, but the entire show is just called Altered Carbon for right now. So I'm wondering, would they do a thing like that? Would it just be like, oh, it'd just be a second season? Or I doubt they'd go through the trouble of like getting another show and just giving it the title of the next book. I'd love to see where they'd go because there's still so much they did leave on it. So which kind of makes me wonder, I mean, because this was also set up to be a mini-series. Like I feel like mini-series typically means that it's kind of a one and done typically. I feel like if it was limited seems like the type of thing where it's like typically if it's limited, that means it will come back. But miniseries usually seems like a one and done. But I feel like there was so much left unanswered. So that's why I'm like wondering, is it going to be a thing of like I said, I have to look into it later on, but how much of this was adapted from the book and how much. So like, is it like a beginning, middle, and end like the book, or is it kind of more like a beginning and middle, and the end part will potentially be a second season? I'm curious about that. But I'd love to see where everything goes, like the future of the Chicay, what Miffy really gets up to, Linda and Bronwyn. Because I like that this was such an isolated story. Like, this wasn't just like a, oh man, this is the world. Like, to me, this was like a very personal story. This was always Miffy's story. And I think going forward, you can either keep it a small story or you can go bigger. I feel like because there's so much of this world that doesn't really get touched on, the world of EVAs. Like, obviously there's a grander world because there is like, obviously like EVA trafficking and, a resistance to like how things are kind of run. Like, the fact is, it's so interesting because like Linda made a point to be like, keep the Chicay around, yet she's working with the opposition that kind of wants to destroy the Chicay and everything that it represents. I mean, at least the way it goes about recruiting its practices and stuff like that when it comes to EVAs. So that, the whole Monica thing, where will, Conrad and Jennifer stand when it's all said and done, just because, there are complicated standings now, like where that would end up. I'd love to see where a second season would take us, especially you also think about like UK and Russia, like this whole, like I said, they're blaming it on Linda, but there still might be some overlying issues from it. So like I said, I'm hoping it gets another season. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.